What would you do if a gun was suddenly pointed at your head by the very people sworn to protect you? Imagine sitting in your car, waiting for dinner with your family, and suddenly the law turns into a weapon. Would you fight back or stay silent? Before we uncover the truth behind what happened to Quentin Archer, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below, and let me know, what would you do in that moment? As the sun slipped beneath the horizon, a warm amber glow spilled across the polished hood of a 1967 Plymouth Belvedere, cruising quietly through the winding streets of Silver Pine Estates. Behind the wheel sat Quentin Archer, a 73-year-old Supreme Court justice, a man who had spent a lifetime defending justice. Yet tonight, all he wanted was to keep a promise. He'd promised his son Maxwell he'd be home for dinner, but first he made a quiet detour. At the far end of Willowshade Cemetery, Quentin stood alone by his wife's grave, his hand resting on the weathered headstone. "I'm trying, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice trembling as if speaking across the veil of time. "Even now, I'm still trying." Back in the car, he glanced at the clock. 7:45 p.m., 2 hours late. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. He knew Maxwell would wait. He always waited. But tonight, there was something different in the air. As he turned onto Maple Hollow Drive, a pair of headlights suddenly blazed in his rearview mirror, gaining fast. Sirens. Quentin's chest tightened. He eased the car to the side, pulling into the shadow of towering oaks. A squad car skidded to a stop behind him. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Driver, step out of the vehicle." Quentin rolled down the window. "Officer, I'm—" But the words caught in his throat as a flashlight blinded him. And then, the cold muzzle of a gun pressed against the glass. In that moment, a lifetime of battles for equality collapsed into a terrifying truth. Even the highest seat of justice couldn't shield a black man in the wrong neighborhood. And as he raised his hands trembling, one question haunted him. Would his grandson ever see him come home tonight? Quentin's heart sank as flashing red and blue lights painted the inside of his car. He pulled over onto Bridgeview Lane, his pulse drumming against his ribs. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, glancing at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Aging eyes filled with a lifetime of battles. Behind him, Officer Silas Whitmore stepped out, his hand already resting on his holster. Quentin watched as Silas reached to his chest, then clicked his body camera off. A quiet dread settled over Quentin. He'd seen this before, in headlines in courtrooms. But now it was him. Tonight, he was the story. "License and registration," Silas barked, his flashlight slicing through the darkness, landing on Quentin's hands. "Officer, Quentin began, voice steady but soft, raising his ID slowly. "Step out of the car. Now." The tone wasn't a request. It was a warning. Quentin hesitated. He thought of Maxwell waiting at home. He thought of Eleanor's grave, still fresh with flowers. And then, he made a quiet decision. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped out, hands raised high. Silas moved closer, his shadow looming. "What's a man like you doing here this late?" he sneered. "I'm just trying to get home," Quentin replied, the weight of every past injustice pressing on his words. Suddenly, from across the street, a porch light flickered on. A child's voice called, "Mommy, what's happening?" For a fleeting second, Silas paused, but then his grip tightened on the gun. Quentin's breath caught. In that fragile moment, he realized this wasn't just about him. It was about every child watching from a window, learning what justice looked like, or didn't. And quietly he prayed, "Let them see me walk away from this." Quentin stood beneath the harsh glow of the patrol car's spotlight, hands still raised, chest rising with slow, deliberate breaths. "Officer, my name is Quentin Archer. I'm a justice of the United States Supreme Court," he said, voice firm yet calm, every syllable carrying the dignity of a lifetime spent upholding the law. But Silas Whitmore let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "A Supreme Court justice?" he jeered. "In this neighborhood? Driving that car? You expect me to believe that, old man?" The disbelief cut deeper than the words themselves. Quentin's mouth opened to protest. But before he could speak, Silas drew his gun, leveling it straight at his chest. "Step back, hands where I can see 'em." Silas barked, finger tightening on the trigger. A flash of memories washed over Quentin. His swearing in at the court, Eleanor's warm smile the day he first donned the robe, Maxwell's tiny hand holding his at the courthouse steps. All the milestones that had brought him here. Now cornered on a lonely street, his life teetering on a stranger's whim. Across the road, the porch light flickered again. The child's face reappeared in the window, watching, learning. Quentin swallowed, lowering his hands slowly, deliberately, palms out. Son, listen carefully, he spoke gently, gaze locked on Silas. Don't make a mistake tonight you can't undo. For a fleeting heartbeat, Silas hesitated. But then, a radio crackled from Silas's belt, dispatch summoning him back. The officer cursed under his breath, conflicted. But the gun didn't lower. Quentin's pulse thundered. He knew this wasn't over. Yet in that moment, he chose stillness. He chose dignity. And silently, he promised, if I survive tonight, this fight won't end here. The cold metal snapped around Quentin's wrists. His breath hitched, not from fear, but from something deeper, something bone deep. Betrayal. The very laws he'd sworn to uphold now shackled him beneath the flashing red and blue of injustice. Silas shoved him against the hood of the Plymouth Belvedere, the badge gleaming like a bitter joke under Maplewood Crossing's flickering streetlight. You think you're above the law, huh? Silas sneered, patting him down rougher than necessary. I've never been above it, Quentin murmured, eyes closing briefly. I am the law. But the words fell useless into the night. A passing car slowed. A teenage girl in the back seat pressed her phone against the window, recording silently. Her mother urged her to look away. She didn't. Field sobriety test now, Silas barked, yanking Quentin upright. He staggered a step, balance unsteady. Not from drink, but age, grief, humiliation. I haven't been drinking, Quentin said softly. You know that. Walk the line, Justice Archer, Silas mocked, drawing a crooked chalk line on the asphalt. Quentin inhaled deeply. Somewhere, miles away, Maxwell's phone buzzed again. Another unanswered call. Another minute lost. Quentin placed one foot ahead of the other, heart pounding, dignity fraying with every unsteady step. He faltered halfway, aging knees giving out beneath decades of service. Silas laughed cruelly, scribbling nonsense into a notepad. But from the corner of his eye, Quentin saw the girl still recording, still watching, and suddenly that lens felt like a fragile lifeline, a quiet witness in a world so eager to turn away. As he stood there, shackled, humiliated under flashing lights, Quentin thought, maybe tonight, the truth found its way into someone's hands. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. At that very moment, Quentin's phone vibrated wildly in his pocket, muffled by the cold steel of handcuffs. The screen lit up with a single name, Maxwell Grayson. Across town, Maxwell paced the living room of their home in Oak Ridge Heights, glancing anxiously at the untouched dinner table. The roast was cold. His wife, Serafina, tried to reassure him, but the worry in her eyes betrayed her words. It's been almost 2 hours, Maxwell whispered, phone pressed to his ear. Dad always calls. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. The knot in Maxwell's chest tightened. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, keys jangling like an alarm. I'm going to find him, he said, voice firmer than he felt. Serafina touched his arm, pleading. Max, maybe he just lost track of time. But Maxwell was already out the door. The night air hit him like a warning. His headlights cut through the suburban dark as he sped down winding streets, retracing the route he knew his father would have taken. As he passed Maplewood Crossing, flashing lights caught his eye. A patrol car, its beams slicing the night, a figure standing rigid under their glare. Maxwell slowed, heart hammering. His phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Quentin finally arriving. He tapped play. Maxwell, if something happens tonight, I need you to know. I'm proud of you, always have been. Maxwell slammed the brakes, his chest constricted. His father's voice, steady, resigned, felt like a farewell wrapped inside love. No, Maxwell whispered, breath shaky. Number. Not like this. He floored the gas, heading straight toward the lights, toward the truth, toward his father. At Riverview Police Station, Quentin sat in a cold, windowless room, wrists raw beneath the cuffs. Across the table, Cassius Blake, the police chief, leaned forward with a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. Beside him stood Aurora Kingsley, the polished mayor of Cliffmore Valley, her pearl necklace glinting beneath fluorescent lights. "Let's make this clean," Aurora said coolly, sliding a manila folder onto the table. "He was driving erratically, smelled like booze, and—" She paused, nodding at Cassius. "We found narcotics in his car." Quentin's lips parted, disbelief shadowing his dignity. "You planted it." Cassius chuckled. "You really think anyone will believe you over us? Over her?" He jerked his thumb toward the mayor. Outside the room's small window, Quentin caught a fleeting glimpse of Maxwell's car pulling into the lot. His chest tightened. "My son's here," he whispered, half to himself. Aurora's gaze hardened. "Then let's finish before he causes trouble." Cassius grabbed a walkie. "Move the drugs into evidence. Log it under Archer's name." In that moment, Quentin felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. His father's voice, his mother's prayers, the marches he once led. And yet, he sat shackled, accused, silenced. His phone vibrated again, buried in an evidence bag across the room. Another missed call from Maxwell. "I won't give you what you want," Quentin murmured, steady now. Aurora leaned closer, smile tightening. "Oh, Judge Archer, it's not about what you give, it's about what we'll take." Outside, thunder rumbled. Maxwell stepped out of his car, fists clenched, unaware that the fight for his father's name was about to become a battle for both their souls. Outside the station, Ophelia Prescott stepped out of her midnight blue sedan, her heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement. Rain clung to her trench coat as she stared up at the looming brick walls of Riverview Police Station. She'd been here before, but never for Quentin Archer. Never like this. Inside, Maxwell rushed to meet her, his face taut with worry. "They're framing him," he blurted. "It's not just a misunderstanding. They're building a case, fast." Ophelia's eyes narrowed. "Take me to him." As they moved down the dim corridor, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, a rookie officer tried to block their path. "Authorized personnel only," Ophelia flashed her badge. "Federal Civil Rights Council. Step aside." Her voice left no room for argument. When she entered the holding room, she froze. Quentin sat slumped against the wall, still in cuffs, his tie undone, eyes heavy but defiant. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was betrayal worn like a second skin. "Ophelia," he rasped, "they're going to bury me." "No," she said firmly, kneeling beside him. "They're not." She turned sharply to Cassius Blake, standing smug in the doorway. "I want his release. Now." Cassius smirked. "Not happening. Evidence is airtight." Ophelia's jaw clenched. Her hand went to her phone, scrolling furiously. "I'm calling the press and the Department of Justice." Cassius's smile faltered. "That won't save him." "Maybe not," Ophelia shot back, "but it'll shine a light so bright, your shadows won't stand a chance." As her words echoed through the sterile walls, Maxwell watched, realizing for the first time that his father wasn't fighting alone anymore, and neither was he. Minutes felt like hours inside the holding cell. Quentin Archer leaned his head back against the cold concrete, sweat beading on his temple. His chest tightened, not from fear, but from a sudden, crushing weight. He knew this feeling. It wasn't panic. It was something deeper, deadlier. The pain surged. His breath came shallow. He clutched at his chest. No one moved. The officers outside watched through the glass, whispering, unmoved. At Starlight Memorial Hospital, Dr. Leonardo Cross reviewed the intake chart, frowning. "This man needs immediate cardiac care. Why wasn't he brought sooner?" he demanded. Cassius Blake shrugged. "He's fine. Probably faking it to buy time." Leonardo stepped closer, lowering his voice but sharpening his tone. "You're gambling with a man's life. He's in distress. I need that ambulance now." "No ambulance." "He's staying in custody," Cassius retorted. Leonardo's jaw tightened. "Then you'll have to answer when this man dies on your watch." He turned to a nurse. "Page cardiology. Get the crash cart, uncuff him. Cassius stepped forward, hand on his belt. He stays cuffed. Leonardo blocked his path. You're impeding medical care. Those cuffs could kill him if he codes. For a moment, silence crackled between them, until the faintest beep came from the monitor. Quentin's vitals dipped. Leonardo spun to the nurse. Cut the restraints. I don't care who signed off. I'm not watching a man die in chains. As the cuffs fell away, Quentin's breathing eased, just slightly, but his eyes locked onto Leonardo's, filled not with fear, but quiet gratitude. Outside, Maxwell watched through the window, fists clenched, a single thought blazing in his mind. They tried to break him, but they'd underestimated his will and those willing to stand beside him. Maxwell Grayson sat at the dinner table, phone in hand, glancing at the clock for the 10th time. His father's seat remained empty, untouched plate growing cold. He dialed again, straight to voicemail. His chest tightened. Come on, Dad. He opened the tracking app, expecting the usual blue dot moving through Oak Ridge Heights. But tonight, nothing. The location was blank. Device offline. A chill crawled up his spine. Maxwell stood, grabbing his jacket. Serena, call the hospital. I'll check the stations. His wife's worried nod lingered as he rushed out into the night. In the car, Maxwell's fingers flew across the dashboard, calling precinct after precinct. No record, no intake, no incident. Every response deepened the pit in his stomach. Finally, Riverview Station answered. Archer? Yeah, he's here. You'll need to come in person. The pause at the end hit like a dull blade. Why? Is he okay? Silence. Then the same voice, flatter this time. He's being processed. That's all we can say over the phone. Maxwell's grip on the wheel tightened. He could hear Serena's voice faintly through his Bluetooth, asking if he'd found him. He didn't answer. His foot pressed the gas harder. As he sped through the dark streets, flashes of childhood raced through his mind. His father reading court rulings late into the night, standing firm in marches, holding his mother's hand at hospital bedsides. Now it was his turn to stand for him. And as the station came into view, Maxwell whispered to no one. They thought he'd stand alone. They were wrong. He parked, heart pounding, knowing whatever waited inside wasn't just injustice. It was a fight for his father's very name. Cassius Blake leaned across the polished oak table, his voice dripping with false concern. Judge Archer, he began, sliding a sleek folder toward Quentin. No one wants this to escalate. Sign the agreement, accept our apology, and we'll make a generous donation in your name. We can all walk away with dignity. But Quentin didn't even glance at the paper. His hands, still trembling faintly from the earlier ordeal, remained folded in his lap. Across from him, Aurora Kingsley flashed a rehearsed smile, her diamond earrings catching the sterile hospital light. It's a win-win, Judge. We're offering you peace. Quentin finally looked up, his eyes hollow yet unwavering. Peace built on silence is not peace, he said quietly. It's complicity. Aurora's smile faltered. Cassius pressed harder, lowering his voice to a threat. You refuse this, we'll ruin you. The headlines will twist your story before sunrise. Quentin exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of 1,000 quiet battles. Let them, he whispered. The truth is worth the cost. Just then, Maxwell appeared at the doorway, out of breath, his face etched with worry and resolve. Dad, are you okay? Quentin met his son's gaze, a flicker of pride breaking through his exhaustion. I'm still standing, son. Behind Maxwell, Serafina Wilde watched silently, taking mental notes as the layers of corruption unfolded before her. At that moment, the camera hidden inside her jacket blinked red, recording everything. As the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed softly above, Maxwell sat in the waiting room, his fingers restlessly scrolling through notifications on his phone. Suddenly, a message popped up from Maya, his niece, a shaky video file with the subject line, Uncle Max, I think you need to see this. Maxwell tapped play, his breath catching in his throat as the footage unfolded. Silas Whitmore, glancing both ways under the cover of night, slipping a small bag into the trunk of Quentin's car. Maya's quiet voice trembled behind the lens. Why is that man putting something in Grandpa's car? Maxwell's hands trembled as he replayed the video, rage and disbelief colliding inside him. She caught it, he whispered, his pulse quickening. She caught him red-handed. He looked up to see Serafina Wilde approaching, her FBI badge glinting under the harsh lights. Serafina, he called, urgency sharpening his tone. You need to see this. This changes everything. She leaned in, watching the video with narrowed eyes. This is the break we needed, she murmured, determination flashing across her face. But beneath the relief, Maxwell's heart ached. His niece shouldn't have had to witness this darkness. He texted Maya back. You were brave, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. We'll fix this. As Serafina forwarded the video to federal prosecutors, the weight shifted in the room. Hope flickered in Maxwell's chest for the first time that night. Across town, unaware of the storm brewing, Cassius and Aurora raised glasses in a private toast, unaware that their facade had just begun to crack. Outside the dim glow of Starlight Memorial, Maxwell and Ophelia stood under the flickering street lamp, exhaustion etched across their faces. Suddenly, footsteps approached, a hesitant, hurried rhythm. Darius Whitfield emerged from the shadows, his uniform jacket half-buttoned, eyes darting nervously around. Mr. Grayson, Ms. Prescott, he whispered, his voice low but urgent. I don't have long. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, pressing it firmly into Maxwell's hand. These are copies of internal emails, body cam footage, patrol car dash cams. The originals? They've been wiped, but I backed them up before they were erased. His breath hitched, as though the weight of betrayal sat heavy on his chest. I've got a family, Darius added quietly, his gaze flickering to a family photo peeking from his wallet. But I couldn't keep silent. Not this time. Ophelia's eyes glistened, her voice gentle yet resolute. You did the right thing, Darius. Even if it's dangerous, you chose truth. Maxwell swallowed hard, gripping the drive tightly. You've given us what we need to break this wide open. Darius nodded faintly, backing into the shadows. Be careful. They won't stop. And just like that, he vanished down the alley, leaving behind a silence heavy with both fear and hope. As Ophelia turned to Maxwell, her voice steady, she said, Let's finish what he risked everything for. Maxwell's jaw clenched, a fire rekindling in his chest. For Dad, for Darius, for everyone they tried to silence. As dawn crept over the city, Ophelia Prescott and Serafina Wilde stood at the marble steps of the Department of Justice, clutching the sealed envelope like it held the weight of every silenced voice. Once we hand this over, there's no going back, Ophelia murmured. Serafina gave a quiet nod, her eyes unwavering. Justice doesn't wait for comfort. Moments later, inside a sterile conference room, federal agents reviewed the USB and video files. A silent beat passed. Then a senior agent stood, his tone clipped. Move! By mid-morning, black SUVs swarmed the Riverview precinct. Agents in windbreakers marked FBI fanned out, their presence electric with urgency. Maxwell watched from across the street as agents stormed the building, securing evidence. Servers were unplugged, filing cabinets unbolted from walls, hard drives sealed in evidence bags. The symbol of unchecked power was being dismantled, brick by brick, bite by bite. Inside, Cassius Blake's face paled as his office door flew open. This isn't a courtesy call, an agent warned. You're under federal investigation. Aurora Kingsley stood frozen by the window, her hands trembling as they cuffed Cassius. You promised we'd never get caught, she whispered, almost to herself. Maxwell exhaled a shaky breath, feeling both vindication and sorrow. Ophelia stepped beside him, voice low yet resolute. We're not done. This is just the crack in the wall. Across the street, a young boy held a cardboard sign, Justice for Quentin. Maxwell's gaze softened, a tear tracing down his cheek. Dad would have smiled seeing that, he whispered. Ophelia placed a steady hand on his shoulder. And he'd remind us, justice isn't just about punishment, it's about restoration. And for the first time in days, Maxwell allowed himself a fragile, hopeful smile. Deep in the shadowed expanse of Timberlake Preserve, Cassius Blake slammed the cabin door shut, sweat beating at his temple. We're out of time, Silas, he hissed, pacing the worn floorboards. Silas Whitmore leaned against the window frame, scanning the tree line with a predator's gaze. Then we finish it tonight. Quentin's breathes his last before sunrise. His words hung heavy, a chilling resolve lacing every syllable. A low radio crackled in the corner, a static-filled dispatch, unknowingly intercepted by the FBI's surveillance van parked miles away. In a dark room at headquarters, Serafina Wilde's jaw tightened as she listened. "They're planning to kill him," she said grimly. "We've got their location." Orders flew like lightning. Back at the cabin, Cassius pulled a battered photograph from his wallet, a younger version of himself shaking hands with a smiling Quentin Archer in front of a courthouse. His hand trembled. "He gave me my first chance," he whispered, almost to no one. Silas barked, "That was then. Now he's our liability." But in Cassius's eyes, a flicker of regret sparked. Outside, branches snapped, FBI agents closing in. Inside, Silas loaded his weapon. "If they breach, we go down shooting." Cassius paused, the photo still in his hand. For a moment, time froze. Then with a deep, shuddering breath, he crushed the photo and threw the gun aside. "No more blood." Suddenly, floodlights blazed through the windows. "FBI, come out with your hands up," echoed through the woods. Silas cursed, raising his gun, but Cassius stepped between him and the door. "It ends tonight, Silas, but not like this." In that single act, Cassius chose redemption over ruin. And as he stepped out, hands raised, the night carried the weight of a man finally standing on the right side of history. Under the soft glow of lanterns lining Windmere Lake House, Serafina Wilde led the Archer family inside, her hand resting reassuringly on Maxwell's shoulder. "You're safe here," she promised, though her voice carried the weight of unfinished battle. The house, nestled beside the still waters of Windmere, belonged to Emmett Callahan, a retired judge and old friend of Quentin's, who opened his doors without hesitation. Quentin, still pale from his ordeal, sat in an armchair near the fireplace, his gaze distant yet unbroken. Across the room, Maya clutched a blanket, her small frame trembling as she whispered, "Grandpa's gonna be okay, right?" Maxwell knelt beside her, pulling her close. "He's stronger than anyone I know," he said softly, though doubt shadowed his eyes. Serafina stood by the window, scanning the tree line beyond the shimmering lake, radio pressed to her ear. "FBI perimeter secured," a voice crackled back. But beneath the surface, calm, danger loomed. Emmett approached, setting down a tray of tea. "This house has held truth and refuge before," he murmured, glancing at Quentin. "It'll hold it again." Suddenly, headlights flashed down the distant driveway. Serafina's heart tightened. "That's not one of ours." Guns raised, agents scrambled into defensive positions. But before the tension could snap, a familiar silhouette stepped from the car. It was Darius Whitfield, hands raised, carrying a sealed envelope. "Proof," he called out, voice trembling with urgency. Serafina exhaled, lowering her weapon. "Let him through." As Darius approached, battered but unbroken, a flicker of hope sparked in Quentin's tired eyes. In that moment, surrounded by loyalty and courage, the Archer family realized their fight wasn't just for survival, it was for the soul of justice itself. As dawn crept over the treetops of Timber Lake Preserve, the FBI encircled the secluded cabin. Inside, Silas Whitmore paced like a trapped wolf, sweat glistening on his brow. "If Quentin Archer walks out alive," he snarled, "everything we built collapses." His voice cracked under the weight of desperation. Cassius Blake wiped his face with trembling hands, realizing too late the monster he'd followed. In the shadows beyond the trees, Serafina Wilde gave the signal. Agents crouched, weapons ready, breaths held. "We go in clean," she whispered. But inside the cabin, a storm brewed. Silas cocked his gun, stepping toward the door. "No witnesses," he muttered. Then a sound stopped him. Faint, familiar. Maya's voice echoing from a phone left on speaker in Quentin's jacket. "Grandpa, come home." For a fleeting second, Silas hesitated, his own daughter's memory flashing across his mind. The rage faltered, a fracture in his resolve. But then his finger tightened on the trigger. A thunder of shouts erupted as the FBI burst through windows and doors. Flashbangs blinding, agents pouring in. "Drop your weapons," Serafina commanded. Silas turned, gun raised, until Darius Whitfield tackled him from behind, knocking the firearm free. "Enough!" Darius shouted, pinning him down. Cassius slumped to his knees, surrendering without a fight. Evidence crates lined the room. Ledgers, hidden drives, sealed envelopes, each a nail in their conspiracy's coffin. Serafina looked over the scene, then back at Quentin, safe in Maxwell's arms by the doorway. In that chaotic, cathartic moment, justice cracked open a door long sealed shut. And as the sun finally rose over Timberlake, its light fell not just on the fallen, but on the brave who dared to stand, even when hope seemed lost. The headlines hit like a tidal wave. Systemic corruption uncovered. Archer case triggers federal probe. As Quentin watched the news from his hospital bed, the screen flashed with images, boxes of seized files, encrypted drives cracked open, names cascading down the ticker. Cassius Blake, Aurora Kingsley, Silas Whitmore. And beneath those names, the true scope emerged, a shadow network stretching far beyond Riverview. It wasn't just a cover-up of a single false arrest. It was an intricate scheme, fabricated charges planted on minority homeowners, properties seized under the guise of law, then flipped to developers for pennies. Entire neighborhoods quietly erased. And Quentin, once a lone victim, had unknowingly cracked the spine of a monstrous machine. Maxwell stood by the window, fists clenched, staring out at the city they thought they knew. "They wanted you silenced because you were the last voice standing, Dad," he said softly. Ophelia, reading through the indictment papers, added, "But your refusal? It made them expose themselves." A knock at the door. Serafina entered, her badge clipped beside her heart. "The Justice Department's expanding the investigation. This goes deeper than we feared." She paused, her eyes heavy with both burden and relief. "They're calling it the Archer Reforms." Quentin closed his eyes, a quiet breath escaping his lips. "Not just my name," he murmured. "Every name they tried to erase." Outside, reporters gathered, chants rising from the street below. For the first time in years, it wasn't outrage alone. It was hope, a fragile, trembling hope, born from the stubborn courage of one man who refused to bow, and a community that finally saw the light breaking through. Inside the grand, echoing chamber of the federal courthouse, Quentin Archer stood beneath the solemn glare of the seal of justice. His hands, though trembling, gripped the podium with quiet strength. Every eye in the room was on him. Not just the jurors, but generations of hope carried in silent prayers beyond those walls. "My name is Quentin Archer," he began, his voice steady despite the weight on his chest. "And I have spent 73 years believing the law could protect us." His testimony unfolded like a tapestry, detailing the night of his arrest, the planted evidence, the camera that was never supposed to record, and the decades-long machinery of greed that preyed on the powerless. Behind him sat Ophelia, Serafina, Darius, and young Maya, their presence a living shield. Maya clutched a small notebook, the same one she'd used to write down everything she saw, her quiet rebellion scribbled in pencil. Across the aisle, Cassius and Aurora stared down at the table, cornered and defeated. When Quentin paused, catching his breath, he looked at the jury. Not as strangers, but as fellow guardians of a fragile truth. "They tried to erase me," he said softly, "but they couldn't erase the truth." The room held its breath. Then Serafina stepped forward, sliding the final piece of evidence onto the table. A recovered server log showing years of tampered records. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Outside, the crowd erupted as the verdict was announced. Indictments filed, reforms promised, walls of silence finally broken. Quentin sat down, exhaustion folding into quiet triumph. Maya climbed onto his lap, whispering, "You didn't just fight for you, Grandpa. You fought for all of us." And for the first time in a long time, Quentin smiled, knowing the fight had not been in vain. A year later, beneath the solemn arches of the Supreme Court, Quentin Archer placed his signature on a ruling that would ripple across a nation. The ink wasn't just black on paper, it was every step he'd taken, every injustice he'd endured, every quiet promise to his late wife that their struggle would mean something. The decision? A historic narrowing of qualified immunity, paving the way for accountability where impunity once stood. As cameras flashed outside, Ophelia Prescott and Serafina Wilde stood beside Quentin, unveiling the Archer Foundation's plaque. Their mission, to defend victims of wrongful policing, to amplify voices long silenced. Maya, standing proudly in front, wore a t-shirt with Quentin's favorite saying, "Justice isn't given, it's claimed." Quentin watched from the courthouse steps, hands resting on his cane, gaze lifted toward the sky. "We didn't just win a case," he whispered to Maxwell standing beside him. "We planted a seed for all the ones who never made it here." Behind them, a crowd chanted his name, not in celebrity, but in solidarity. Somewhere in the sea of faces, a young boy held up a handwritten sign. "My dad said I can dream bigger now." As the sun set over the marble steps, Quentin leaned into Maxwell, a quiet sigh of both peace and resolve. "Tell them our fight's not over," he said softly. "Tell them to carry it forward." "And now I want to ask you, what does justice mean to you? How far would you go to stand up for what's right, even when the system seems impossible to change?" If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And if you believe in the power of truth and courage, subscribe to join us on more journeys that matter. There are stories that don't just end in victory or defeat, they ripple through generations, reminding us of the quiet strength it takes to stand when the world tells you to kneel. Quentin Archer's journey wasn't just about a man fighting for his own dignity. It was about a father, a leader, a symbol of resilience, refusing to let injustice have the last word. In a world where power often hides behind uniforms and titles, Quentin faced the terrifying weight of being both vulnerable and visible. Yet even as handcuffs cut into his wrists, even as lies piled up against him, he never let anger eclipse his integrity. He didn't fight back with fists or fury, he fought back with truth. And that truth, as fragile as it seemed in a dark jail cell, was powerful enough to unravel a corrupt system. His story teaches us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to sign an unjust deal. The steady voice in a courtroom, testifying not just for oneself, but for every unseen victim who never got their day. But perhaps the greatest lesson Quentin leaves us is this: justice isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. It's found in the hands of those willing to carry the torch forward, even when the path is lonely and steep. So the next time we see wrong disguised as right, may we remember Quentin Archer and dare to be the light in someone else's dark night.